Okay, hello everybody. My name is Amanda Gobeli. I work for the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, and what I want to share with y'all today is sort of a virtual approximation of a program that we always do at the Rolling Plains Bobwhite Brigade, which is called Getting to Know Your Quail. So when we do this in person, it's basically like a guided dissection of a quail. And we found it's a really good way to help people get an idea of what kind of an animal a quail is, and to help them understand how quail interact with their environment and just how they live their lives. So to help me out with this today, I actually have a very special assistant here. I'll go ahead and get him out. Okay, this guy, you can see him there. This is Kirby Quail. Okay, he's a hand-tame male northern bobwhite, which is the most common and the most widespread of our 4 Texas quail species. And he's going to help us by showcasing some of the external anatomy features that we would normally be looking at when we do the Getting to Know Your Quail deal. Obviously, if the real program is like a dissection, we're not going to be doing that with Kirby here, but he will be happy to show us some of the parts on the outside that we can see and take a look at. So to start off, we want to take a look at Kirby's head. Okay, and I'm going to hold him up close to the webcam so you can kind of see his cute little face. Oh, and he likes chin scritches. So bobwhites, northern bobwhites, are kind of unique in the sense that the coloration on their head actually differs quite a bit between male and female. Okay, so on male quail, like Kirby, you can see that he has those very bright and very striking black and white stripes on his face, whereas in the female, and you should definitely go look up some pictures of female bobwhites, you would see that those white stripes are instead kind of a light brown or like a tan color. So the male's a little bit fancier with his coloration, and the female is better camouflaged. And when animals have those very kind of overt like physical differences between males and females, we call that sexual dimorphism. So if we continue to look at his little face, another really important feature that we look at is the eyes. Okay, so the eyes on animals are really good for letting us know whether that animal is likely to be a predator or a prey animal. And we have a really good phrase for remembering which is if the eyes are on the front, they hunt. If the eyes are on the sides, they hide. Okay, so Kirby's eyes, you can kind of see if he looks at you head on there, you can see that his eyes are definitely positioned directly on the sides of his head. Okay, so that means he is primarily going to hide, which makes him a prey animal. Having the eyes like that on prey means that they are able to see almost entirely all the way around their head, which is really useful if you are an animal that needs to keep an eye out for predators. Whereas if you're a predator and you have your eyes on the front of your head, and that's really good for giving you really good depth perception. So if you're trying to like gauge the distance between yourself and something you're chasing, that is a really good trait to have instead. Another really important feature on Kirby's head is this all-important structure here, which is, of course, his beak. And in birds in particular, the shape and the structure of the beak can tell us a lot about those birds, or that bird's kind of feeding habits. So if you think about like some of the other distinctive bird beaks we have that are out there, you can tell that there's a lot of diversity that exists. So if we think of like an eagle or a hawk or some other kind of raptor, those guys tend to have really large beaks relative to the size of their head, so they're like big and powerful, and they have that very distinctive, very defined hook at the end of them, which is really good for grabbing prey and especially for tearing the flesh off of a carcass. So if you're a bird of prey like those guys are, that's the kind of beak that you want. If you think instead of something like a hummingbird that has that really long, narrow beak that's perfect for getting into flowers and getting nectar, which is their primary food source, then that's a very different beak situation. Now with Kirby and his beak, you can hopefully kind of see when I hold him up here that his beak is pretty small relative to the size of his head. Okay, it's got a little bit of a hook, a little bit of a curve to it, but definitely nothing on the scale of like a bald eagle would have. And what that beak is for in quail is for eating mostly sort of 3 main things: seeds, fruits, or sometimes vegetation, and insects. Okay, so although we just got done talking about the eye placement and how that means quail are prey items, you would be forgiven if you were a grasshopper for calling quail a predator, because they do predate insects, so that is one thing that their beak is really good for. Now, another thing in the external anatomy of our quail that's really easy to kind of overlook, but is really super important, is the feathers. Okay, and feathers, of course, are going to be really crucial for a lot of different kinds of birds. And we always say that there are three primary functions of feathers. Okay, the first of which is camouflage. So the coloration of those feathers helps the animal to hide in its environment. I'm going to turn Kirby around here a little bit so you can kind of see the coloration of the feathers on his back. Oh, he's such a good sport. He's so calm. He's been doing this for years, so he's very used to this kind of celebrity treatment. But with that dark kind of brown and black modeling coloration on the backs of bobwhite quail, you can probably imagine that if these guys were out in the Texas grasslands, which is where you're going to find them, if they were hunkered down deep in that grass and being really still, they would be super difficult to see, okay, because those feathers and that coloration provides great camouflage, especially if you're the female bobwhite that doesn't have all these bright white stripes on her face. The second function of feathers is thermoregulation, okay, which is like a fancy word for saying it helps them to maintain their body temperature. So they can actually either like fluff those feathers up, or they can lay them flat against their body, depending on whether they want to heat up or cool down. So the last function of feathers, and probably the most obvious one that we think of, is flight. Okay, and I know that there are some of y'all who are probably wondering, like, can quail fly? Because, you know, looking at Kirby, like, he doesn't seem super aerodynamic. You know, he's kind of potato-shaped. But quail can, in fact, fly. Okay, they don't fly in the same way that, like, a duck does, where it flies, you know, long distances. They don't soar on thermals like raptors or like vultures do. Their wings are kind of short and stubby and round, and they are very good for short, intense bursts of speed. So they can flap those wings really fast and get up off the ground very quickly. And then they can travel a relatively short distance. We always say that the distance that you can throw a softball, more or less, is about how far a quail is going to fly when he gets off the ground. And then they can sort of get away from something on the ground that is trying to eat them. Okay, so the purpose of their flight is pretty much entirely to get away from predators, rather than to travel from one location to the next. All right, the last structure I want to show y'all with Kirby's help is his feet. Okay, and again, much like the beak, the feet in birds are really, really good tools for trying to figure out what that bird's lifestyle is like. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a close-up. Oh, Bobo is so cute, Bobo. Of his foot. Okay, Curbs. So you can hopefully kind of see the foot on Kirby and on bobwhite quail and all quail in general has those three long toes that are pointed forward. Okay, so those toes have some little claws on the ends of them, and then he's got the one little bitty toe that's pointed backwards. And if you're trying to think where you've seen these feet before, the answer is probably going to be on chickens. Okay, quail are essentially tiny chickens, so they have many of the same habits and behaviors as chickens and a lot of the same anatomical features. So, like the toes on his feet are not designed for gripping, like they would be on like a songbird that holds onto branches with its feet, or in like a raptor that grabs prey with its really powerful feet. They are made for running around on the ground and scratching in the dirt. Okay, just like a chicken would do. All right, well, I'd like to thank Kirby for being such a good sport, and I'd like to thank y'all for joining me on this video today. If you are interested in learning more about the parts of a quail and how they affect his lifestyle, and even in exploring some of the internal anatomy, which of course, like I said, we're not going to do that with Mr. Kirby here today, but we do have an online lesson that goes through the whole getting to know your quail experience, so both external and internal anatomy. Really, really cool learning tool if you're interested in quail or just wildlife in general. I'm going to put a link to it in the description of this video so you can get to it directly from there, or you can visit nri.tamu.edu/learning and search for the lesson Quail Anatomy. And you can explore it for free on that webpage. So once again, thank y'all. And if you have any questions or comments, I will be looking at that on this video as well, so I'll be happy to get back to you and give you any additional information. Thank you.